In this video, we will explore the Pythagorean theory of music and color as described in the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. Drawing from ancient wisdom, Hall presents a worldview in which sound and light are not merely physical phenomena, but living forces, harmonies that shape the cosmos itself. Harmony has long been acknowledged by great thinkers as the immediate foundation of beauty. A thing is considered beautiful only when its parts are joined in a state of balanced unity. The world itself is called beautiful, and its creator is named the good, because that which is good naturally acts in accordance with its own essence. And action that flows from the essence of good must be harmonious, since the result it produces aligns perfectly with the nature from which it springs. Beauty, then, is nothing other than harmony revealing its own true being in the realm of form and appearance. All things in existence may be seen as arranged along a scale of increasing goodness, beginning with matter, which reflects the smallest presence of good, and culminating in spirit, which embodies the greatest. In the human being, the highest part of the self is also the highest good. It follows that this inward essence most readily perceives goodness, for the external good in the world corresponds naturally to the inner good of the soul. What is often labeled as evil is, in reality, simply the weakest expression of good, just as matter is the faintest reflection of spirit. The lesser the good, the fainter the harmony and the dimmer the beauty. What we call deformity is thus a disordered arrangement of elements that are, in themselves, harmonious when taken separately. Deformity is a kind of dissonance, something contrary to the natural order, since, in a world governed by the good, all things are meant to express that good through arrangements that reflect harmony. Harmony, therefore, is the visible and audible expression of the eternal good's will. It is likely that the Greek initiates drew their understanding of music's spiritual and healing properties from Egypt, where Hermes was venerated as the originator of this sacred art. One myth recounts how he fashioned the first lyre by fitting strings across the curved shell of a tortoise. In Egyptian tradition, both Isis and Osiris were celebrated as divine patrons of song and verse. Plato remarked on the deep roots of music and poetry in Egyptian culture, suggesting these arts had existed there since time immemorial and were of such sublime quality that only beings of divine nature could have conceived them. Within the Secret Teachings, the lyre itself symbolized the human being. The instrument's body stood for the physical form, the strings for the nervous system, and the player for the indwelling spirit. As the spirit played upon the strings, it brought about the harmonious state of proper function, while corruption in the soul led instead to discord. Various ancient civilizations, including those of China, India, Persia, Egypt, Israel, and Greece, wove music into their religious rites, as well as into poetry and performance. Yet it was Pythagoras who elevated music to its true philosophical stature by unveiling its basis in number and proportion. Though not a performer himself, Pythagoras is often remembered as the one who uncovered the pattern of the scale we now recognize as fundamental. His insights were rooted in the sacred teachings he absorbed from different priesthoods in whose mysteries he had been initiated. For a long time he meditated on the laws that govern harmony and tension in sound. How he ultimately arrived at his understanding is not definitively known, but a story has been passed down to illustrate the process. On one occasion, while reflecting deeply on the nature of harmony, Pythagoras happened to pass by a metalworker's shop where artisans were striking iron upon an anvil. As he listened, he observed that the tones produced by the larger tools differed from those made by the smaller ones. By carefully attending to how certain sounds blended while others clashed, he began to uncover the principles behind the relationships between musical tones. Curious, he stepped inside and examined the instruments, noting their proportions and weights, which seemed to correspond to the harmony, or lack thereof, produced by each. Inspired by this experience, he returned home and set up an experiment. He fixed a wooden beam so that it extended outward from his wall and suspended 4 strings from it. Each string was made of the same material and thickness, and each was drawn to a different tension by attaching to it a weight. The varying tensions mirrored the differences he had observed in the metal shop. As he plucked these strings in combination, he noted that some pairs created a pleasing sound, while others did not. In his exploration, Pythagoras found that the first and last strings, when sounded together, produced a deep and perfect harmony, a relationship he understood as the interval we now call the octave. This occurred because one string bore twice the tension of the other, creating a precise relationship of balance. Continuing this method, he determined that another pair of strings, where one had half again as much tension as the other, created a different harmony, corresponding to what would later be called the fifth. Similarly, a third harmonic relation was found when one string bore a third more tension than another, which yielded what he associated with the interval of the fourth. Another subtle difference in tension produced yet another harmonic pairing, softer and more refined in quality. Through careful analysis of these intervals, Pythagoras discerned a hidden order governing all these sounds. He came to see these harmonic relationships as encoded within a symbolic figure held sacred in his school, a triangular arrangement of points known as the tetracties. This mystical diagram represented the first four whole quantities, and within their interrelations could be found the secret architecture of musical harmony. Though later thinkers have questioned the literal accuracy of the story involving blacksmith's tools and sounds, it is widely held that Pythagoras likely conducted his true investigations using a monochord, an instrument consisting of a single string stretched taut across a soundboard, equipped with movable bridges to isolate specific lengths and tensions. For Pythagoras, music was not a separate art, but an expression of mathematical truth, a reflection of the deeper cosmic order. The harmonies of music were governed by precise numerical principles, which he believed mirrored the very way in which the cosmos itself was composed and maintained. In his view, number came before music, and music merely revealed the structure that number already encoded. With these discoveries, Pythagoras gradually introduced his students to what he regarded as the greatest secret of his teachings. He described all aspects of creation as arranged in layered realms, each corresponding to a particular sound, proportion, symbol, hue, and shape. On each of these planes, from the most refined concept to the most tangible substance, he demonstrated that the same patterns repeated, proving that harmony, form, and order were not human inventions but universal truths. Through this convergence of observation and reason, Pythagoras affirmed the presence of eternal laws shaping the visible and invisible alike. Once Pythagoras had established music as a precise and orderly science, he extended the same principles of harmonic balance to the wider natural world. He explored the idea that everything in the cosmos, from planets and stars to elemental substances, was bound together through the same mathematical relationships that govern musical harmony. This notion would find echoes centuries later, when a scientist arranging the elements by increasing atomic weight noticed a recurring pattern, where certain qualities repeated in a regular cycle. This became known as the law of octaves in the field of chemistry, a modern confirmation of an ancient insight. Because they believed true harmony must be determined by rational principles rather than by the senses alone, the followers of Pythagoras called themselves canonics. This distinguished them from those of the harmonic school, who trusted more in intuition and personal taste. Yet despite this strict rationalism, Pythagoras deeply understood the emotional and psychological power of music. He even spoke of musical medicine, using harmonies deliberately to restore balance to mind and body. He had a particular admiration for stringed instruments and advised his students to avoid sounds he considered unrefined, such as those produced by flutes and clashing cymbals. According to him, the soul could be cleansed of its irrational disturbances through solemn melodies played on the lyre. In his exploration of musical healing, Pythagoras found that the various musical modes used in Greek composition each stirred particular emotions. Some could excite the spirit, others soothe it. One story tells of a night when, while studying the heavens, he came across a man in a wild state, drunk and overcome with jealousy, who was preparing to set his lover's house ablaze. The man's agitation was intensified by a nearby musician playing in a forceful and passionate style. Pythagoras approached the musician and urged him to shift to a slower, more composed rhythm. Upon hearing this change in mood, the enraged man gradually calmed down, gathered the wood he had brought, and walked away quietly. Another account speaks of Empedocles, one of Pythagoras' followers, who managed to save his host from an imminent attack by altering the mode of a tune he was playing, thereby disarming the would-be assailant's wrath. It is also said that the famous healer Aesculapius treated nervous disorders with blasts from a loud trumpet, showing that sound could affect not just emotion but physical health as well. Pythagoras himself often treated both spiritual and physical imbalances by having certain musical compositions performed in the presence of those afflicted. He would also recite lines from ancient poets such as Homer and Hesiod, using the poetic rhythm and content as a form of gentle therapy. At his school in Crotona, it was customary to begin each day with songs designed to awaken and energize the mind, and to end it with melodies intended to calm the spirit and ease the transition into rest. Each spring, at the time of balance and renewal, he gathered his disciples in a circle around a singer who led them in song, accompanied by the lyre. These musical rituals were not merely for enjoyment, but were seen as vital exercises in inner harmony. According to Iamblichus, Pythagoras developed specific musical arrangements as remedies for different states of distress. Some were meant to relieve sorrow and grief, others to pacify anger or dissolve cravings. In every case, Pythagoras regarded music not just as an art, but as a method of aligning the soul with the order and logic of the universe. The Pythagoreans likely saw a relationship between the traditional Greek musical modes and the planets. Historical writers such as Pliny claimed that specific celestial bodies moved in harmony with particular modes. Saturn, for instance, was said to follow the Dorian, while Jupiter aligned with the Phrygian. Each mode seemed to correspond not only with planetary movement, but also with human temperaments and emotional states. A mode described as fiery could intensify a passionate emotion like anger, while one associated with water might serve to calm and balance that same intensity. The profound influence of music on Greek culture is captured in the reflections of Emil Naumann, who notes that Plato dismissed the idea that music existed simply to entertain or please. Instead, he believed that music should shape character, inspiring love for what is noble and a dislike for what is base. Melody and rhythm, in his view, reached deeper into the soul than any other art. Following the views of Damon of Athens, Socrates' own teacher in music, Plato argued that even the slightest change to musical scales could have destabilizing effects on society. A new and potentially corrupting tone was not just a matter of artistic taste, but a threat to the very structure of the state. Plato held that music which uplifted the mind held far greater value than that which merely delighted the senses. He asserted that governing authorities had a duty to suppress music that was indulgent or sensual, promoting instead compositions marked by dignity and restraint. Bold, powerful tunes were considered suitable for men, while gentler, more soothing ones were assigned to women. Instrumental music, in particular, was approached with caution, since without words to guide interpretation, it was harder to judge whether a piece would uplift or degrade its listeners. Because popular taste tended to favor flashy and shallow performances, such tendencies were often dismissed with disdain. Even in modern times, music continues to carry powerful emotional weight. Martial music still rouses courage in wartime, while sacred music, though no longer composed under the same philosophical framework as in ancient times, continues to stir deep religious feeling among believers. Among all the Pythagorean doctrines, one of the most mysterious was the idea of a universal harmony produced by the stars themselves. According to legend, Pythagoras alone among mortals was able to hear this celestial music, the music of the spheres. The concept may have originated with the Chaldeans, who envisioned the stars and planets singing as they journeyed across the heavens. This idea found echoes in sacred and literary texts. The Book of Job speaks of a moment when the morning stars sang together, and Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice tells us that even the tiniest orb moves through the sky with a voice like that of an angel. Yet, very little has survived of the Pythagorean vision of sidereal harmonics, and what remains is fragmentary, leaving us only with hints of what may have been a profound and far-reaching theory of cosmic music. Pythagoras envisioned the cosmos as a vast monochord, a single celestial string, its upper end fastened to pure spirit and its lower end to dense matter, forming a link between the divine and the earthly. This string, stretched from the heavens to the earth, symbolized the harmonious structure of the universe. Some traditions hold that he divided this system into a fixed number of realms. Others offer a slightly different count. In one arrangement, the outermost region was known as the Empyrean, home of the immortals and the fixed stars. Beneath this realm came the spheres associated with the traditional planets: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon, followed by the elemental regions of fire, air, water, and earth. This structure mirrors ancient symbolic systems, such as the design of the Jewish sacred lamp, where the sun held the central place and the other lights were positioned symmetrically around it. According to writers like Macrobius, the Pythagoreans linked the tones of the diatonic scale to the motion and scale of the celestial bodies. Each planet, through its motion across the heavens, was thought to displace the divine ether in such a way as to emit a particular tone. The tone of each sphere reflected its inherent speed, mass, and position in the cosmic order. These sounds, produced by the constant revolutions of the heavenly bodies, were not random noises but expressions of divine harmony, partaking in the same order from which they originated. The furthest planets were believed to produce the deepest tones, while the closest emitted the highest. This celestial harmony was poetically imagined as the song of the Muses, each planetary tone contributing to a greater cosmic chorus, referred to in ancient teachings as mnemosyne, the sound of divine remembrance. Greek mystics further noted a correlation between the planetary spheres and the sacred vowels. Each heavenly realm was associated with one of the primal sounds, the first with alpha, the next with epsilon, followed by eta, iota, omicron, upsilon, and finally omega. When these vowels were joined in unison, they formed a complete and perfect harmony, a sacred hymn, rising perpetually toward the divine source. Though not always explicitly mentioned, the order of the spheres was likely understood to begin with the moon and ascend upward through the heavens. Ancient instruments often featured 7 strings to mirror this celestial pattern, and it is widely believed that Pythagoras was the first to add an 8th string to the lyre traditionally credited to Terpander. Each string symbolized a planetary force and was tied to specific aspects of the human body, reflecting the interconnectedness of music, cosmos, and person. The divine name itself, according to Pythagorean belief, was formed from combinations of these planetary tones. The Egyptians, sharing a reverence for this sacred musical order, confined their temple music to these 7 tones alone, prohibiting any others in ritual contexts. One of their hymns declared that these 7 voices offered praise to the supreme deity, the unceasing force behind the universe. In another, the divine proclaims himself as the eternal lyre of creation, tuning the melodies of the cosmos. The Pythagorean view held that all things in existence possess a voice and are forever engaged in singing the praises of the divine. This eternal hymn, however, goes unheard by human ears because the soul, entangled in the illusions of the material world, is deafened by its attachment to sensory experience. Only by freeing itself from the limitations of the physical plane can the soul once again become attuned to the divine harmonies, just as it was said to be during the earliest and purest age of humanity. Harmony naturally responds to harmony, and when the soul returns to its rightful state, it will not only perceive the celestial symphony once more but will take part in it, joining the chorus in endless exaltation of that supreme and timeless good that governs the boundless complexity of existence. Within the teachings of the Greek mystery traditions was a profound understanding of the intimate bond between music and form. Architecture, as an example, was not merely physical construction, but was seen as a visual manifestation of musical structure. Each architectural element corresponded to a tonal quality or mode, and when arranged in proper proportion, a building was thought to resonate like a harmonious chord. Its beauty and spiritual power were rooted in its mathematical precision, Only when these relationships mirrored the principles of harmonic intervals could the structure truly embody harmony. It was this insight that led Goethe to famously reflect that architecture is music given shape in stone. The ancient initiates, especially those responsible for the construction of sacred temples, demonstrated remarkable knowledge of vibrational laws. Their ceremonial spaces were designed with great care to amplify and direct sound in ways modern science is only beginning to rediscover. During rites of initiation, priests would speak or chant invocations within specially designed chambers. Even a soft whisper in such a space could swell into an overwhelming resonance, causing the entire structure to tremble with sound. Over time, the materials used to build these temples, whether wood or stone, became so saturated with the repeated tones of the rituals that they could later echo those same vibrations when touched, as though the memory of the ceremonies lived on within the very walls. Nature, according to these teachings, assigns to every substance its own fundamental tone. When various elements are brought together into a single form, their combined frequencies form a chord. If that chord is sounded in its true resonance, it can cause the form to break apart, separating back into its original components. The same principle applies to living beings. Each person is believed to have a unique vibrational signature, and should that specific tone ever be fully expressed or invoked, it could lead to the unraveling of the individual. The tale of the collapse of Jericho's walls at the sound of Israel's trumpets is a symbolic reference to this hidden truth, the mystical power of vibration and the fatal potential of the keynote. Light, according to Edwin D. Babbitt, unveils the splendor of the visible world and yet surpasses all that it reveals in its own radiance. It brings beauty into view, discloses what is beautiful, and stands as beauty itself. It acts as a revealer of truth, exposing things as they truly are and stripping away illusion. Its limitless waves reach across the vastness of space, carrying images from stars so distant that their light seems nearly eternal in its journey. At the same time, light descends into the realm of the infinitesimal, making visible through the microscope what is utterly beyond the power of unaided sight. Like other subtle energies, its motion is gentle yet far-reaching and potent. Without its life-giving power, all existence, plant, animal, and human, would vanish and the world would fall into decay. For this reason, light and the colors it contains deserve deep contemplation, for the more one investigates its inner nature, the more it reveals itself as a reservoir of force that can nourish, restore, elevate, and bring joy to life. Because light represents the fundamental physical expression of life and envelopes the cosmos in its brilliance, it becomes essential to understand something of its refined and mysterious essence. What is commonly known as light is, in fact, a particular vibratory rate that triggers a response in the optic nerves. People rarely recognize how confined they are by the limits of their senses. Far more exists within the domain of light than the eye can perceive, and countless forms of light remain forever hidden, beyond the reach of any instrument. There are hues no one will ever see, just as there are sounds no one can hear, scents that go undetected, flavors unknown, and textures unfelt. Humanity is immersed in a finer world that remains completely outside of ordinary experience, only because the sensory centers within have not been developed to perceive those more delicate frequencies that make up that hidden realm. Throughout the history of both advanced and more primitive cultures, color has served as a symbolic language used to express sacred and philosophical ideas. In ancient Persia, the city of Ecbatana, as described by Herodotus, had concentric walls, each one painted in a different hue to correspond with one of the heavenly bodies, demonstrating the insight of the Magi regarding cosmic and chromatic harmony. A great astronomical tower in Babylonia, built to honor the deity Nebo, rose in a series of ascending platforms, each painted in the tone linked to a planetary force, an early testament to their grasp of the spectrum as it relates to divine creative principles. In India, a ruler of the Mughal dynasty had a fountain constructed with layered cascades, where the water changed color as it flowed downward through specially arranged paths, passing through each tint of the rainbow. In the highlands of Tibet, color plays an important role in artistic expression, where it reflects the emotional and spiritual nature of beings. As noted by L. Austin Waddell in his account of Tibetan Buddhist art, paler shades like white and yellow often denote gentler aspects, while deeper colors such as red, blue, and black are associated with fiercer traits, though light blue, reflecting the heavens, may symbolize the celestial alone. Generally, deities are shown in white, spirits in red, and demons in black, paralleling the symbolic color use found in European traditions. In the dialogue Meno, Plato, through the voice of Socrates, defines color as a kind of outflow or emanation of form, harmonized with sight and apprehensible by the senses. Later, in Theaetetus, he expands upon this idea, proposing that if we accept the premise that nothing exists independently, we will then understand that each color, whether it be white, black, or any other, comes into being through the meeting of the eye with a fitting kind of motion. In this view, the essence of a color lies not in the object nor the observer alone, but in the interplay between the two, unique to each perceiving consciousness. Plato challenges us to consider whether colors appear the same to other beings. For example, whether a dog sees red or blue as a human does, or whether these impressions differ entirely based on the observer. The Pythagorean symbol known as the tetractys, a sacred figure made of 10 arranged points, encodes ancient Greek understandings of cosmic principles, including color and sound. The top portion, composed of a trio of points, represents undivided white light, the divine source containing within itself all potential tones and hues. The remaining points below unfold into the spectrum of visible color and the sequence of musical notes. These colors and tones are regarded as dynamic creative agents, radiating from the primal source to bring order and form to the cosmos. They are grouped in two sets, one forming a triad that relates to the spiritual or higher aspect of existence, and the other forming a group symbolizing the material or less ordered realm. In the initiatory mysteries, the 7 divine creative powers, often called logoi, are depicted as currents of force emerging from the mouth of the eternal divine. This allegory represents the breaking apart of the pure light of divinity into the distinct spectrum of visible rays. These same 7 were known to the ancient Hebrews as the Elohim and to the Egyptians as the builders or governors, often portrayed wielding blades, symbolizing their task of shaping the cosmos from the unformed essence. The veneration of planets in ancient cultures reflects their identification with these divine principles, understood as physical embodiments of the 7-fold creative power of God. The ruling intelligences of these celestial bodies were said to reside mystically within the sun, which, like the original white light, holds within it the potential for all sound and color, even before they are expressed. Various symbolic systems have been devised to express the correspondences between planets, musical tones, and color frequencies. Among them, the system grounded in the principle of the octave proves most illuminating. The human ear perceives a wider range of vibration than the eye. Where the ear can register many levels of pitch, the eye is limited to a smaller segment, specifically, a group of basic color vibrations that fall just short of completing a full octave. If red is taken as the foundation of this color scale, it aligns with the initial tone in music. From there, the sequence progresses with orange aligned to the next tone, followed by yellow, green, blue, indigo, and finally violet, each pairing echoing a musical counterpart. Completing the octave would require a return to a higher harmonic of red, just as music returns to its starting note in a higher pitch. This alignment gains further significance when we observe that the primary tones in music correspond precisely to the primary colors in light, and that the final and least defined note in the musical sequence aligns with the most elusive and unstable of the visible colors, demonstrating a deep and enduring harmony between what is heard and what is seen. In the Principles of Light and Color, Edwin D. Babbitt affirms the harmony between the spectrum of colors and the scale of musical notes. Just as the first note of the musical scale is produced by the longest and slowest air waves, so too is red positioned at the base of the chromatic scale, formed by the broadest and least frequent waves of luminous ether. As one progresses upward in the musical scale, the vibrations quicken, and likewise, the highest visible color, violet, results from etheric waves vibrating with much greater rapidity than those producing red. When the full sequence of musical tones is completed, the pattern begins again on a subtler level, with each vibration doubling in frequency, yet echoing the same series of notes. In much the same manner, once the visible spectrum concludes in violet, a new sequence begins beyond the threshold of normal vision, with invisible hues unfolding according to the same rhythmic law, though their vibrations are far more refined. When these colors are aligned with the 12 signs of the zodiac, they are set in a circular formation like spokes radiating from a center. The color assigned to Aries is bright red, to Taurus a red tinged with orange, to Gemini clear orange, to Cancer an orange with a hint of yellow, to Leo vivid yellow, to Virgo yellow blended with green, to Libra true green, to Scorpio green shifting toward blue, to Sagittarius pure blue, to Capricorn a blue with violet tones, to Aquarius deep violet, and to Pisces a violet that shades into red. In the Eastern esoteric tradition, as interpreted by H. P. Blavatsky, the colors are mapped onto the sevenfold nature of the human being and the corresponding states of matter. Violet is linked to the etheric double, which resides within the subtle etheric realm. Indigo connects to the higher mind or spiritual intellect, associated with an aerial, transitional condition of matter. Blue belongs to the auric field, which corresponds with vaporous states. Green is the color of the lower mind or animal soul and is tied to a delicate, transformative phase of substance. Yellow reflects the spiritual soul, aligned with the element of water. Orange is attributed to the life force or vital energy and is paired with a dynamic, critical condition of matter. Red, the most substantial, represents the center of animal passion and corresponds with matter in its densest, crystallized form. Because of these symbolic correspondences between color, tone, and the structure of human nature, the planetary assignments within the musical scale follow a slightly different order to maintain their proper resonance. The first tone corresponds with Mars, the second with the Sun, the third with Mercury, the fourth with Saturn, the fifth with Jupiter, the sixth with Venus, and the final tone with the Moon, each planet reflecting a specific vibration of color and sound in accordance with its archetypal nature.